Hey everyone, this is Rob with Codecademy. I'm a software developer based out of Seattle, Washington. In this video, we're going to walk through the R project, Cleaning US Census Data. So far, we have looked at a number of different methods we may use to get data into the format we want for analysis. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with how to diagnose the tidiness of data, how to combine multiple files, how to change the types of values, and how to manipulate strings to represent data better. You can use these methods to transform your datasets to be clean and easy to work with. Alright, let's get started. Alright, we're going to imagine that we're a data analyst at the Census Bureau. The person who previously had your job left all the data they had for the most recent census. Now this data is spread out among several CSV files. Unfortunately, they didn't use R and would manually look through these CSV files whenever they wanted something, sometimes just copying and pasting certain numbers into Excel for analysis. This is not scalable or repeatable. Now we're going to imagine that our boss wants us to dig into this data and find some insights by the end of the day. Let's look at how we can get this data into R and into reasonable shape so we can perform some analysis. Alright, let's go ahead and clean up this data, starting with step 1. Okay, in step 1, we're going to go ahead and open up our Census CSV files in the Navigator. So I'll go ahead and click on each of these to open them up. And then I clicked on the Expand button so that we could see all of our files. And we can go ahead and click through them. And as you do this, we'll notice that we have our columns for our different files listed on line 1. These columns are similar across all of our files. Then for each line number, we have a number of entry containing the values for each of those columns. Alright, let's go ahead and close out of these CSV files. And then minimize our screen. And so we can make an observation of how all of these are named. They're all states underscore then a number.csv. We've taken a look at the information that they hold. So now we can think about what tools we will need to import and clean this data. Fortunately, we've been learning what those tools are through our course. So let's mark step 1 as complete, and we'll move on to step 2, where we're going to import our tools. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this file structure. And we want to go in our first code block, and we're going to import in the 3 libraries that we've been using and will need for this task to clean up our data. We have our readr library, our dplyr library, and then finally our tidyr library. Alright, we have all of our libraries that we're going to need to clean up our data. Let's move on to step 3. This can be quite a bit easier to inspect our data stored in these files once we have a data frame. Currently, we can't even call the head method on these CSVs, so we don't have a way to read them. So let's begin by creating a variable called files. And we're going to set it equal to list.files, and this method is going to allow us to import all the CSV files that we need. Now if you take a look at the hint, you can get an idea of what the syntax is going to look like. Because we have multiple files, we can go ahead and look for a pattern. So we'll use our pattern keyword, and we'll set it equal to the pattern that we want to find. So instead of file underscore dot asterisk or wildcard CSV, if we remember what our files look like, they all begin with states underscore. So let's go ahead and use that. States underscore dot asterisk or wildcard CSV. Okay, let's mark step 3 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 4. Our next step is to read each of these files into a data frame. We can use that doing the lapply method, and we'll save the results to df list. I'm using df as a short for data frame. So we're going to go ahead and set this equal to our lapply method, and we're going to pass in files. And then if you look at the hint, you're going to see that we want to use the read CSV method. Alright, let's mark step 4 as complete. I'm going to close up this hint, and we'll go ahead and take a look at step 5. From here, we want to concatenate all the data frames in df list into one data frame called US Census. And so if you open up your hint, this should remind you what we learned, that to concatenate data frames using the dplyr library, you can use the bind rows method. So we want to save this to a value of US Census, and we use our bind rows method, and we're simply going to pass in df list. Now remember, df list is where we use the lapply method on all of our files from line 17, and we're using the read CSV method on that. So let's go ahead and mark step 5 as complete, and we'll move on to step 6. It's time to start inspecting our US Census variable that we just created. We'll begin by first printing the column names. So we're going to say print, and then we'll use our column names method, and we're going to pass in US Census. So I'll go ahead and save the code here, and we can see this is where we ran our print command and printed out the call names method where we passed in US Census, and we have our column names of X1, state, total pop, Hispanic, white, and so on. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to take a look at the data types that belong to these columns. So we can find that with the str method, and again we'll pass in US Census, and we'll save our code. And so underneath our column names, we have our different data types that belong to each column. In the X1 column, our data types are num. In the state column, our data types are character, and so on. So the last thing we want to do to inspect our data is to use the head method, and again, pass in US Census. Let's go ahead and save our code, and we'll go ahead and take a look at these. Great, we have all of our columns up top, and we can click this arrow to keep on going all the way to the end. And each column has a value of a certain data type within it. Now as we look through this data, we might think of different ways we want to clean it up. In the gender pop column, we have a value that seems to have the numbers for males and a number for the value for females. We might want to break this up into 2 columns, one for male, one for female. If we were to look at the column income, we would first notice that income is a character type and it has a $sign in front. So as we're cleaning up our data, we might want to remove that $sign, and we also might want to convert this to some sort of number. These are just a few of the things that we'll do as we go through our project. So let's mark step 6 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 7. We're going to work on removing and reformatting the columns. So the first thing we noted when inspecting US Census, if we go all the way to our first column, is that we have a column of X1, which doesn't seem to store helpful information. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which at this point doesn't seem to provide us with any meaningful data that we want to hang on to. So let's go ahead and remove this column from our US Census data frame. So we'll set US Census to the value of our US Census, and we'll use our pipe. And then hopefully you remember the method that we're going to use is the select method. Now for the select method, we can provide all of the columns that we actually want to keep. However, because we want to keep all of the columns, it would be quicker just to identify the column of X1 that we don't want to keep. And so to do that, we can just use the subtraction symbol and name our column X1. Now let's go ahead and use the head method and take a look at US Census and see if that did what we hoped to accomplish. Alright, we can see that our X1 column is now gone from our data frame. Alright, great job. Let's mark step 7 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 8. Now at this point, we have 6 columns remaining, and the columns such as Hispanic, White, Black, Native, Asian, and Pacific all have this percentage sign at the end of them. So for our next task, we want to remove this percentage symbol, and we're going to go ahead and save it to US Census. So let's say US Census is going to be set equal to the value of US Census pipe, and in this case we're going to mutate the columns. Now we want to name the column that we want to mutate. So we'll start off, if we look at our table, we'll start off with the first race of Hispanic. So say Hispanic, and we'll set it equal to the method gsub. You could take a look at the hint to get a better idea of the syntax. And then to this method, we're going to pass in 2 escape characters and the percentage symbol to target that percent. Our next value is going to be what we want to replace that percent sign with. In this case, an empty character. And then we name our column once again, Hispanic. Now we're going to do this for a number of different columns, but first I want to make sure that our effects have taken place. So I'm going to print out the head and pass in US Census. Go ahead and save our code. And we can see that before we mutated our column, we have a percentage symbol. And after we have done that, the percentage symbol has been removed. Okay, now we want to do this for the rest of our columns. Alright, the format for each should be the same. We name the column, we set it equal to the gsub method, in which we target our percentage, we replace it with our empty character, and then we name our column again. And we separate each of these mutations with a comma. Okay, I'm going to do a quick save. And we'll go ahead and confirm that the removal of the percentage has taken place across all of our columns. And we can see that it has. Alright, let's mark step 8 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 9. If we scroll to our second to last column, we'll see that we have an income column that starts off with a dollar symbol. We're going to want to remove this. Again, this is because income currently is a data type of character, and we want to convert it to a number. So first, before we do that, we need to remove this dollar symbol. So let's go ahead and set US Census equal to the value of US Census pipe. We're going to go ahead and call the mutate method again, and we'll name our column income, and we're going to set it equal to the gsub method, and we're going to pass in the character that we want to target, our $sign. Then we're going to pass in what we want to replace it with, an empty character, and then we simply name our column income, and then let's go ahead and take a look at the results. When we save our code, we can scroll down to this last data frame that we printed out. And we can see that we've successfully removed the dollar from the beginning of our income value. Alright, great job. We'll mark step 9 as complete and go ahead and move on to step 10. In step 10, we want to take a look at the gender pop column. So we can see this right here. It looks like it's holding male, you can see by the letter M, and female values for the gender population. Our data might be more helpful if we separate this column out into two new columns, male pop and female pop. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll set US Census equal to US Census pipe. And now we want to use the separate method because we want to separate the values in this column into two different columns. So we name the column gender pop, and you can take a look at the hint to get familiar with the syntax for what we do next. We have our vector, where the first value is our new column name, and we're going to go ahead and call this male pop, and our second value is going to be our second column name, in this case, female pop. And then outside of the vector, we'll make sure to use a comma, and we want to identify that the character we want to split on. In this case, it's going to be an underscore. When we look at our table, we see that an underscore is a place where we can separate our value for our two columns. So now let's go ahead and use the head method and take a look at US Census to make sure this is done what we would expect. And when we scroll to the end, we now see that we have a male pop column and a female pop column with values provided that were split on the underscore. Awesome. Let's mark step 10 as complete, and now let's go ahead and take a look at step 11. In step 11, we see that we have the capital M and the capital F. Now because the values in male pop and female pop are characters, are a character data type, now the values in male pop and female pop are character data types. We want to be able to convert this to a number data type, so we'll need to get rid of that capital M and capital F. So let's go ahead and do that in our next step. We'll clean up this data a little bit. US Census is equal to US Census pipe, and then we'll simply use the mutate method, and we'll name our column male pop, and we'll set it equal to our gsub method that we should be familiar with at this point, and we want to substitute the capital M with an empty character. And then we name our column again. Alright, so that should go ahead and remove the M from the male column. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to remove the F from the female pop column. We'll name our column female pop, and we'll set it equal to G sub, and we want to remove the F, and then we want to pass in a value of an empty character to replace the F. And then we'll go ahead and name the column again female pop. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the head method and pass in US Census to take a look at our results. Alright, and we can see that the capital M and the capital F have been removed. So remember, we did that by naming our column. Then we used the G sub method to substitute our character of capital M or capital F and replace it with an empty character. And then again, we name the column of male pop or female pop. Okay, great job. Let's mark step 11 is complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 12. We want to update our data types. We've removed our symbols, but if we can remember, most of our columns have data types of characters. So we want to go ahead and convert our Hispanic, White, Black, Native, Asian, Pacific, Income, Male Pop, and Female Pop from character data types to numeric data types. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll get our data frame US Census, then we'll go ahead and use the pipe, and the method we're going to use is the mutate method, and then we're going to go ahead and just follow this formula. First, we'll go ahead and work on the column, Hispanic, for example, and we're going to go ahead and set it equal to as.numeric, and then we simply pass in the name of our column. And then we have a comma to separate all of our columns that we're going to convert from a data type of character to a data type of number. And we name the column, use the as.numeric method, and then we pass in the column name again. So let's go ahead and take a look at the results by passing in US Census to the head method. And if we take a look at this table, we don't necessarily have visual confirmation that the data type has changed. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and type in str and pass in US Census. Now we'll go ahead and just save our code. And we should see that in our results, all of the columns we attempted to change, such as Hispanic, White, Black, Native, Asian, Pacific, Income, Male, and Female Pop, the data type has been converted to none. Alright, great job. Let's mark step 12 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 13. We want to update the value of the race columns. Since we removed the percentage symbol, we want to convert these values to decimals. This will help to make the calculations easier. If you take a look at the hint, we can simply divide our values by 100 to convert them from percentage value to decimal form. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We'll set US Census to the value of US Census pipe, and then we'll use the mutate method, and then we're just going to follow this formula. We'll name our column Hispanic, for example, and we'll set it equal to the name of the column, Hispanic, divided by 100. And then we simply do that for the rest of our columns. The white column is equal to white divided by 100. Black, Native, Asian, Pacific will all follow the same formula. Okay, let's go ahead and view our results. Perfect. We can see that now all of the values for our columns are in decimal form. So what should happen is if we add the values in each of our columns for our different races, they should add up to a total of 1, as we're now working with decimals instead of percentages. Okay, let's mark step 13 as complete, and we'll go ahead and move on to step 14. We're going to begin by checking for duplicate rows, because there's no need to have those in our data. So we can do that by piping in US Census into the duplicated method, And then we'll go ahead and pipe that into the table method. We can go ahead and save our code. And if we take a look at our hint, we can see that the number of trues indicates how many rows are duplicates. And so here we have our true column, and we have a value of 5. So that means that there's 5 duplicate rows that we're dealing with. So let's mark step 14 as complete, and we'll go ahead and take a look at step 15. We only want a US data frame with unique, distinct rows. So we can go ahead and do that by setting US Census to the value of US Census pipe, and then we'll go ahead and call the distinct method. And now for step 16, we just want to confirm that those duplicated rows have been removed. So we can go ahead and take our code from 2 steps before. We can pipe US Census into the duplicated method and pipe that into a table, and when we save our code, we should expect to see that there are no trues. Alright, we'll mark step 16 as complete, and our last and final step, step 17, we're just going to view the head of US Census. Alright, that's it. Your data frame is all cleaned up and ready for analysis. It's up to you to decide what you want to find out now. To recap, we can remember that we removed the X1 column that didn't provide any helpful details to someone viewing the data frame. Then we noticed that a number of our columns were a data type of character that we wanted to convert to the data type of number. Before we could even do that, we had to remove characters that wouldn't convert to numbers easily. We had to remove the $sign. We also had to remove a percentage sign. Once we were able to do that with the gsub method, we were then able to use the asNumeric method to convert our data type of character to a data type of number. Now that you have a clean set of data, it's really up to you to figure out the best way to analyze this to come up with results that might be helpful. Alright, great job on this project. This is Rob with Codecademy. Happy coding!